Hey everybody, as promised, today is going to be video number 2 of a two-part video series about repackaging foods for long-term storage. If you watched the first video we did, we talked about vacuum sealing, we used some bags, and we also did some canning jars with oxygen absorbers, some without, using the food saver to pull out the oxygen from the jars and the bags. Today, we're going to talk about using 5-gallon buckets with Mylar bags and oxygen absorbers, which is a very common method used by emergency preparedness people to create long-term food storage out of things that will apply to this type of storage. Let's get started. If you watched the first video that we did, I talked about the 6 enemies of long-term food storage, and I'm going to provide a link to that video down below so that if you missed it, you can go back, review that video, and learn about that important step to any repackaging food for long-term storage. This method creates an anaerobic environment for the foods that we want to store for a long period of time, and we do that by using Mylar bags and oxygen absorbers. These things placed into the Mylar bag, which will be heat sealed, will pull the oxygen out of that environment, and that's how this works. Since we're creating that anaerobic environment, as we talked about in the first video, you do not want to package foods with a moisture content higher than 10%. Dry grains and goods are absolutely ideal for this kind of storage. Packaging foods that have moisture in them or fats can spoil quicker and create botulism and other dangerous organisms. Oats, dried beans of all different kinds, white rice, whole grains like dry corn, wheat berries. The list goes on and on of dry goods that you can package this way and have great success with. So just remember, when you're doing this, for proper food storage safety, you want to use dry goods in an anaerobic environment. Anything with a moisture content in it greater than 10% can create a very dangerous situation that can make you and your family sick or worse. And on that same note, while we're talking about it, some might be tempted to store salt or sugar this way, and that's another no-no. You could put it in a Mylar bag and seal it without pulling all of the oxygen out, but if you do that, you're going to end up with solid boat anchors. This method will allow us to take foods that might have just a few years, 2 to 5 years shelf life sitting around in your pantry, and turn it into something that could maybe go 20 or 30 years. It's important to remember that not all foods packaged in these manners, and like the first video, the methods that we use there, not all foods magically become good for 20 or 30 years. Remember that some foods, even packaged this way, will only extend to maybe 5 years or a little longer. So it's important to know what it is you're packaging and how long you can expect that to last. Remember that the way you store your foods is going to depend a lot on how much success you have in long-term storage. You can't package foods like this, throw them out in the hot shed, and expect to get 20 or 30 years out of it. Okay, so let's talk about the gear that we need to accomplish this successfully. First off, we're going to need some Mylar bags. Not all of these bags are manufactured the same way. There's, like anything, there's good quality and junkier pieces of equipment. When you're using Mylar bags for storage like this, I strongly suggest that you don't use anything thinner than a 5 mil spec on the bag. They come in different thicknesses, so when you order them, you'll have that option. I'm using some 5 mil bags here today. Some people will only use 7 mil and so forth. But it's my opinion that 5 mil should be pretty much the minimum thickness specification that you'll want to purchase and use for these bags. Secondly, we're going to need some oxygen absorbers. You can buy these in many of the places that you buy the Mylar bag. It's important for you to know that one size oxygen absorber does not fit all. These are smaller units that I have here. They're 500 cc's per little bag. This type of storage that we're doing here with a 5-gallon bucket requires a minimum of about 2,000 cc's up to 3,000 cc's. So what I'm going to do is just use more of the smaller oxygen absorbers to meet that specification in my bucket. You can buy these in different sizes. I like to buy the smaller ones because I use those sometimes in the canning jars with the vacuum sealer like we showed you in the last video as well. And in that case, I don't need a 2,500 cc oxygen absorber. Okay, I'm going to do up some pinto beans here in a couple of buckets. you're using a sufficient thickness bag, like I talked about earlier, that should be a safety barrier between your food and whatever plastic bucket you use. I tend to buy food grade storage buckets like this, use them both ways, because that way if I ever need to use them for something else, I can. Here's a huge red flag right here. When I packaged up the oats, there was a lot of dust coming off the product, flowing back as I was pouring it in. And if you look at our Mylar bag, you'll see that it's coated with dust. We're going to want to make sure we clean that off before we try to heat seal it, otherwise that'll compromise our seal. Okay, again, these are 500 cc's. I want about 2,500, so I'm going to use 5 of these in each bag to get the desired result. Once we get these oxygen absorbers placed, it's kind of important to move rapidly. We don't want to just leave these things out trying to work in the atmosphere for an extended period of time. Okay, to seal these guys, I'm just going to use a flat hair iron. And what I like to do is try to push out as much of the air as I can to start. But I'm going to leave one corner loose and we'll push the rest of the air out when we get to that point. Now I'm just going to place this on here and let it seal it up. We'll do one edge like this first. I'll just kind of work my way across from here. You could use a regular clothes iron for this, and a piece of wood works fine also. I'm just using this method here because I find this little tool here to be quite a bit easier. Okay, I've left this corner open so that we can push all the air out of this bag now. Make sure that I can get it down there and put the lid on this bucket. Okay, we've got it sealed up. I sealed off my last corner after I pushed some of the air out. Now I've got enough room to squish this bag down and get the lid on the bucket, but I can also feel that the air, what's left in there, is not escaping out when I push down on it, and I know I've got a good seal. Okay, this is all it takes to take store-bought foods that you can buy very economically and repackage them for long-term storage. The last step in this process is simply placing the lids on the bags, and you can use a rubber mallet and hammer those down. I don't like to do that right away. I like to let these sit for a few days, and that way I can ensure that the oxygen absorbers have worked, that my seal on my bags is 100% successful, and that we don't have any compromise there. Once I've allowed the oxygen absorbers to do their job for a couple of days and I've inspected these bags, then I'll place the lids on these things, seal them off, and mark them with the date and the contents in them. What I like to do now is package some up in these jars that I'm going to vacuum seal, and that allows us to rotate through our food storage and use these foods that we do eat on a regular basis. When we run out of all of these options of one particular product, then I'll open up a bucket and we'll start packaging up some in these jars, and also just in the regular pantry container that we pull out of on a daily basis. It's just that simple for you to start creating your own long-term food storage. What are the benefits to this? Well, these emergency food buckets that you buy all the time right now, freeze-dried food, are getting to be about $150 a piece, depending on the manufacturer. Today I was able to package up over 100 pounds of food that will last much longer than I need it to, and I was able to do all of this for less than $100. Hey everybody, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button down below. Those things help us out in building the channel, and as always, remember, get ready so that you and your family can succeed and thrive. I'll have to edit that out. This stuff up. What I'm going to do now is spill it all over the table and feed the birds with the leftovers.